$1 million sounds like a lot of money, and for most of your working life, that was the number, that was the goal, that was the finish line. But here's what I've seen happen over and over again working with retirees. You cross that finish line with $1 million, maybe a little bit more, and you can still run out of money in your late 70s or early 80s. Not because you overspent, not because you got crushed by the market, not because you made one critical mistake, but because of a chain reaction of events. One small decision in year one of retirement, something that seemed completely reasonable at the time, triggered a second problem. And then that second problem triggered a third problem. And then by the time the damage was actually visible, the portfolio was in a hole that it couldn't dig itself out of. Today, I want to show you exactly what that chain looks like, link by link, with real numbers. And then I'm going to show you the exact spot in the chain where if you break it, the whole thing stops. And if at any point you want to see how this applies to your own situation, there's a link in the description to this video. Feel free to book a call with us. Someone on my team is happy to chat with you. We look at this stuff every single day. So let's start today by painting us a scenario. We've got Bob. Bob's 65 years old. He's just retired. He has exactly $1 million saved in his retirement nest egg, between $750,000 in an IRA, $150,000 in a Roth IRA, and $100,000 in a taxable brokerage account in his name. Bob has a house that's worth $500,000. He's got it completely paid off, and he'd like to spend $7,000 a month in retirement. Now, he's also just filed for Social Security and is expecting to collect $2,200 every single month, with the cost of living adjustments on top of that in the future, from Social Security. So if he wants to spend $7,000 a month and he has $2,200 of it covered by Social Security, that means that he needs another $4,800 a month in extra spending money to meet his spending needs. So Bob's built up a retirement portfolio of $1 million. He needs to take out $4,800 a month to make up his retirement income gap, covering what Social Security won't in terms of what he needs to spend. So he feels like that's pretty straightforward, right? Well, he's got $1 million. He's going to take out $4,800 a month. He does the math on the distribution rates and feels like it's pretty reasonable and proceeds forward, right? Well, what he's failing to realize is that the sequence in which you take money out of the accounts, in other words, which of those three accounts does he actually take the money out of first, matters a whole lot and has several downstream effects. We had a client a couple of years ago come find us because they had done a great job saving for retirement, built up a nest egg across a variety of different accounts. Now they were a couple of years into retirement, and every year, the first few years, when they got their taxes done at the end of the year, they wound up owing way more than they expected to, and it had several downstream effects. So they realized that they had to take a lot more money out of the portfolio to pay these taxes than they really thought they would, and they were concerned that they were going to run out of money and that their retirement nest egg was not going to be big enough. The first link in the chain is the one no one sees coming because it seems like the most obvious move. That first link is taking money out of the wrong account first. Remember, Bob needs to take $4,800 a month out, and so he assumes that he should just take those distributions from the largest of his three accounts. He has $1 million saved up. The largest one is his traditional IRA with $750,000 in there, $750,000. So that seems reasonable, right? Take money out of the largest account first, allow those two smaller accounts to grow a little while before you start taking money out of those. Maybe you can make them last a little bit longer. Well, the thing is, every dollar that Bob takes out of his traditional IRA is counted as taxable income. And that can add up if he's taking $4,800 a month out. So when we do a tax projection with all these factors considered, the $2,200 every single month from Social Security and the taxable income he'll have of $4,800 12 months out of the year, he's going to wind up in the 22% tax bracket when we run a tax projection with all these facts included. Not only is he in the 22% tax bracket, but by the end of the year, he's going to owe $15,000 in income taxes to the IRS. And if he lives in California like me, another $4,032 to the state of California. Add that up, that's a total tax liability just on his income of $19,032 for the whole year, or $1,586 per month. Now, to pay this tax, Bob has a choice. He can instruct the Social Security Administration and his brokerage firm that holds his IRA to withhold for taxes from those distributions. So if he does this for the Social Security Administration, his benefit is $2,200 a month. He can instruct them to send some of that $2,200 directly to the IRS toward his taxes and then just send the rest to him. From his IRA, maybe he instructs his brokerage firm to send some of that $4,800 a month to the IRS, some to the state of California, and then send the rest to him instead. Alternatively, he could withhold nothing from those distributions and just make quarterly estimated payments to the tax authorities along the way. But any way you draw it up, he's going to owe some taxes if he takes money out of that IRA first. You add all this up, and Bob's going to have less than the $7,000 per month he needs to live on, right? $2,200 a month from Social Security, $4,800 a month out of his IRA. If he has to pay $1,586 a month toward his taxes, given this fact pattern, he's only going to be left with $5,414 per month to spend. That's less than his $7,000 target. And that first decision, it seemed pretty reasonable and innocuous at the time of where's the $4,800 going to come from? Well, Bob decided to take it from his IRA. The result, and the first link here, was that he's going to pay a little bit more in taxes. It's going to put him in the 22% tax bracket. But that impacts something else that most people never ever connect to their portfolio. The second link is that Bob's tax bracket is actually going to impact what he's going to be paying for healthcare in retirement. Bob, like most Americans, is going to obtain healthcare after he turns 65 and for the rest of his life from the Medicare program. And Medicare has a feature where you might have to pay more than the base Medicare premiums depending on what your income is. There are several parts to Medicare, as you might know. There's Part A that covers some of your emergency services, and we pay for Part A while we're working. That's part of our FICA taxes, the 1.45% of our W-2 wages that we pay into the system that contributes toward our Medicare costs in retirement. And if you have 10 years where you're paying at least a little bit into the system, when you get into retirement, you'll get Part A for free without having to pay out of pocket. Part B, we pay out of pocket a monthly premium beginning when we enroll at 65 every month for the rest of our lives. Same with Part D, prescription drugs. Well, if our income is above a certain threshold, our premiums for Medicare Parts B and Part D might be higher. Here's what those tiers look like based on 2026 numbers. So that first link, that first decision Bob made to take the $4,800 a month out of his IRA resulted in him being in the 22% tax bracket and owing about $19,000 between the IRS and the state of California. The second link means that given this amount of income, he's going to be in that first Medicare premium surcharge tier and actually have to pay an extra $81.20 every single month for Part B and an extra $14.50 on top of his ordinary premium for Part D. Now, this is the part that gets a little bit confusing and trips a lot of people up, is his income from this year is not going to impact his Medicare premiums for next year. It's going to impact his premiums for the year after. So there's always a 1-year lag. And the reason for that is Medicare wants to charge us premiums starting on January 1st of every single year. But when do we have to file our taxes by? It's not until April 15th, right? So there's this several month period between when Medicare wants to charge us premiums for that year and when we actually have to have our tax information filed and reported for the previous year. So there's a 1-year gap. So if Bob proceeds with this decision to take $4,800 a month out of his IRA, his Medicare premiums will go up by about $95, $96, not next year, but the year after that. And that's confusing to a heck of a lot of people out there. So realistically, these Medicare premium surcharges are simply another form of tax. The more income we have, the higher rate of tax we pay. We have a progressive tax system, graduated tax brackets, as you're aware of. This is another form of tax that we need to know about and potentially manage around. And in Bob's case, that decision to take the $4,800 a month out of his IRA means that he's going to have to pay an extra $95.70 for his Medicare, again, not next year, but the year after. That works out to about $1,148 a year, and his monthly amount that he needs to take out of that $7,000 coming in for taxes is actually $1,682, thanks to this additional cost for Medicare premium surcharges. So what this means for Bob is he simply needs to take more out of his IRA than the initial $4,800 he was planning. If he needs to pay about $1,600 monthly toward taxes and his premium surcharges, by my math, he needs to take another $1,800, give or take, out of the IRA monthly, so that after tax and after the surcharges, he's left with the $7,000 per month that he needs to spend money on. So if he's taking $1,800 a month more out of the account, that's $21,600 per year in the 22% tax bracket. That means that he's paying an extra $4,752 per year to the IRS. And in the 9.3% California bracket, if he lives in California, it's an extra $2,009 on top of that. You add those two together, you get an extra $6,761 in taxes just to keep up with all this. So between that extra taxation and the extra $1,148 per year he's going to need to spend on Medicare because of the premium surcharges, this is becoming kind of an expensive decision that he made in that first link to take the money out of his IRA. It works out to a total extra cost of about $7,900 a year, or almost $660 a month. So now he's paying more in taxes, he's paying more in healthcare, and all that means is that he needs to take more money out of his portfolio. And that leads us to the most dangerous link in the entire chain. So Bob's taking more out of his portfolio than he expected because his taxes are higher, and because his taxes were higher, that means that he needs to pay more for healthcare costs. And since he needs to take more out of his portfolio than he initially anticipated, his sequence of returns risk turns out being greater than if he could have suppressed those distributions in the earlier years. And that's the third link that we need to talk about here. Sequence of returns risk has to do with the fact that we really don't know when or why the markets are going to crash. Remember, we're talking about maybe a 20, 25, 30-year retirement or longer. And over the course of history, the stock market just tends to crash periodically. That's something that we know. It's something we should expect. It's not a bug of the system. It's kind of a feature, and is precisely why we get rewarded with good long-term returns in the stock and bond markets. So it's a risk that we need to be aware of. And if we come into this exercise with the idea that we don't know when or why or how the markets are going to crash, but we know that they do crash every 7 to 10 to 15 years-ish, well, Bob's going to live through several of these bear markets, these market crashes over the course of his retirement. And mathematically, there is a more fortuitous time for that to happen and a less fortuitous time. The most fortuitous time for these crashes to happen is at the very end of the time period, when you have 20 some odd years of strong investment returns before you experience one of these bear markets, because when it happens at the end of the timeline, it's not as hard to recover from. But if it happens in the least fortunate of circumstances, with least fortunate timing, right after you retire, that's the period when you have the most at stake, you have the most retirement in front of you, and mathematically, it's hardest to recover from that. So let's pencil this out. Let's assume that Bob has a moderate comfort level with risk, and that he wants a pretty balanced portfolio that we can reasonably expect to return about 7.25% per year over the course of his retirement. Now, Bob initially thought he would take out $4,800 a month from his accounts. We figured out that he needs to take an additional $1,800 on top of that to cover the Medicare premium surcharges and taxes and so forth. That means that with more money coming out of the accounts, it puts more pressure on the portfolio and leaves him a little bit more susceptible to the sequence of returns risk. Now, if he gets that 7.25% year in, year out, with this increased distribution amount, because he's taking the money out of the IRAs first, well, his portfolio balance over the first 10 years of retirement, it does tend to go down a little bit. And by the end of year 10, he's left with about $826,000 across the accounts. So it's veering down, but he's not in awful shape, and that's not a terrible place to be overall. So the next thing we need to do is stress test the situation. So this sequence of returns risk says that if we experience really bad returns first, like in year 2 of retirement, let's say that Bob experiences one of these bear markets and his returns in that year are negative 25%. You can see that that has a big impact long term. And by the end of year 10, his portfolio balance is all the way down to $313,000. And mathematically, that's really the point of no return. If Bob gets those average long-term returns, if we do this Monte Carlo projection, we run 1,000 trials, knowing the probability that his investments might go up and down, and then we have the program tell us at the end of his retirement period, in how many of these trials did Bob get to the finish line with money in the bank, and in how many of them did he not? Well, right off the bat, if he has average long-term returns, his chances of not having to make a change to this plan are only 47%. So it's about a coin flip. It's a little bit lower than I would like to see, but there are some tweaks that he can make to strengthen his whole situation. But if he has that bad market event right off the bat and suffers from the sequence of returns risk that we're talking about, his chances of not having to make a change go all the way down to 6%. 2%. That's way lower than we would really like to see. So far, that first decision Bob made to start this chain of events, the first link, is costing him about $7,900 a year or $6,600 a month extra in taxes and healthcare costs and all that, plus all this additional sequence of returns risk that has the potential to kind of blow up his plan if he's not careful. And here's the thing. None of this was inevitable. There's one chain in the link where if Bob had broken it, none of this other stuff would have happened. So let's go back to link number 1. Bob kind of jumped to the conclusion that the money that he needed to take out of his accounts should come from the traditional IRA first, because it was the biggest. And by doing so, he'd just give his smaller accounts some time to grow before he depleted them. Well, he could also switch up this order if he wanted to. So here's what it would look like if instead he took money out of his taxable investment account first, and then his Roth account second, and he didn't touch his traditional IRA until very last. So if Bob takes money out of his taxable account first, right off the bat, his tax liability is substantially lower in year number 1, and that breaks the first link. His tax liability is lower, he's in a lower bracket, therefore that breaks link number 2, lower tax bracket. His income is below these Medicare premium surcharge tiers. He's not paying that extra amount for Medicare, at least in the first couple of years. And that breaks link number 3 as well, because with a lower tax rate and no Medicare premium surcharges, he simply has to take less money out of his portfolio. And that reduced pressure helps him balance that big sequence of returns risk that we were just looking at. So if Bob breaks this chain and starts by taking money out of his taxable account first, and then his Roth, and then his traditional IRA, he changes things by quite a bit. In his original plan, by the end of year 10, his portfolio would be down to $855,000 if he gets that average return of 7.25% per year. Now, that's not a terrible place to be, but if he revises this distribution strategy, by the end of year 10, he'll still have $1 million in his portfolio ready and available for his retirement. Now, yes, every penny that he takes out from that point forward will be taxed as income. He might have some of these same tax issues we've been talking about. But the key is that he's shortened his retirement timeline by 10 years, which really mitigates this sequence of returns risk that we're talking about. Yes, he'll have mandatory distributions out of that IRA. Yes, that might result in some Medicare premium surcharges at that point. But his sequence of returns risk will be substantially less because he's preserved more portfolio value over the early years of his retirement. Now, if you're watching this and you're starting to wonder whether your withdrawal strategy is set up properly, not just with regard to which account should you take money out of first, but also how does that affect my tax? How should my portfolio adjust? What does all this mean for my Medicare costs over the rest of my life? This is the stuff that my team and I talk about all day, every day. There's a link in the description of this video. Feel free to click it, book a call with us. Somebody from our team is happy to walk through your situation and identify whether there are some issues worth addressing. So the point I'm trying to make here is that by breaking the chain earlier on in the cycle, that's going to have a profound downstream impact. Number 1, in Bob's case, all he has to do is readjust which accounts he's taking money out of first, and by preserving his portfolio value over the first 10 years of retirement, he's really mitigating that sequence of returns risk that we've been talking about, because if he catches a bad stock market, a really bad bear market early on in his retirement, it does have the potential to derail his retirement plan. And if he makes that change, breaks that link, by the time he's 75 years old, if we project out year by year and he gets 7.25% annually, he's going to increase his portfolio value by $194,719. That's a substantial increase. And by the time he's 85, it'll be a difference of $251,787. Now, in practice, we're never going to get that exact average rate of return every single year. But my point is that he just needs to make some minor adjustments to prevent a whole lot of different bad things from happening down the road. Bob never had a money problem. He had a sequencing problem. $1 million could certainly be enough for Bob to retire on. He just needs to make sure that he protects it from the chain reaction that we're talking about. So the bottom line is this: $1 million doesn't run out because of one big fat mistake. It runs out because of a chain of events. And that chain starts with taking the money out of the wrong account, which results in a higher tax bracket, more taxes owed, increased costs for your health care throughout retirement. That pressure reduces the size of your portfolio, and makes you a lot more susceptible to sequence of returns risk. If you break the first link, the whole chain stops. Now, if you're watching this video thinking, okay, I understand the chain, but what about the full income plan? How do I build something that's protected from the start, not just reactive as we go along? Well, that's exactly what I cover in this next video. It's about what I would do if I were 62 years old, I had $1 million saved up, and I were trying to retire right now. In this video, we go over each of the explicit, exact decisions I would make. We'll cue it up now. I suggest you watch that next. I'll see you there.